Welcome back to the program, Mom. Zev Brenner. You heard of My Unorthodox Life. Unorthodox. How about orthodoxed? That's our topic of conversation. Berel Solomon made a wonderful movie, 9 months in the making, where he chronicles where he went from being unorthodox, non-orthodox, not knowing what Judaism was all about, becoming Chabad Hasidic man who made a wonderful, wonderful film. So, Berel Solomon, thank you for joining us.
Zev, thank you so much for having me here. And I got to tell you, I love your show. You do great work. Keep up the great work. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
So thank you. So here you made this wonderful film, 9 months in the making, about your growing up. You grow up, what do you call yourself? Unorthodox, non-orthodox, Jewish, twice a year Judaism. Is that best describe who you were?
Yes. So we would go to shul, twice a year to a conservative shul. And I went to a Jewish high school and a Jewish elementary, but it was much more, let's say, on the conservative, not even conservative. I would say it was more on the reform end of it, where there's no God in Judaism, meaning it's all about tradition, right? It's about Yiddish, it's about Israel, and it's about matzo ball soup, and that's what makes you Jewish.
Now you grew up in that kind of a background. You got involved in drugs in the nightclub scene, until finally you made the spiritual odyssey where you chucked it all and became Chabadnik, a Lubavitcher Chassid, where you now have a wonderful family and have this film. You were involved in real estate. You were involved in coaching. You have a video production company. So it took you 9 months to make this movie. Did you expect to take this long to produce such a film?
So I own like a full-fledged video production company. I was thinking that this is going to be like a 90-day endeavor. Usually stuff that we produce for our clients is like 30 days. And 90 days into this, I was just like, this is not even close to where it needs to be. So it ended up taking 9 months to produce the whole film, because really every second of the film is nitpicked to the core. Really, people would ask me like, well, why did you do this? Like, what was your
Yeah,
intention?
what made you decide to make this movie?
Right, good question. So when I first saw the garbage movie on Netflix, I didn't, and the only reason why I saw it is because I first
Were
saw.
you talking about My Unorthodox Life? Is that what you're
No,
referring to?
that's the second anti-Semitic bio that Netflix put out. But the first one that they put out was called Unorthodox 2 years ago, and it just chronicled like the story of this woman leaving the Orthodox community. And as I started to delve more into it, if you just type Jewish on Netflix, you'll find over half a dozen films exactly the same narrative. And I said to my wife, I'm like, this is just it's so uneven reporting. Not to say that there's not people that leave the Orthodox community, but for every one that leaves, 1,000 go in, and it's just uneven reporting. So I said to myself, I have to balance this out, because I have a story, and I think it's the more accurate story. Chabad brings tens of thousands of people back to Yiddishkeit a year, and so does Breslev and Aish and all these different Kiruv organizations, and I had to show the truth.
So how come I'm not watching it on Netflix? I can watch
good
the other one. Why don't I see Berel Solomon, formerly
good
Ryan Solomon? Why don't I see you on Netflix?
Good question. So we courted Netflix when we first started producing this to carry our film, and they happen to have been very interested, because for some reason they're obsessed with Orthodox Judaism. I don't know where the obsession comes from, but just type Muslim or type Christian or whatever it is. There's more Jewish videos in all the other denominations, even though we're the smallest of the religions by
And
far.
some of them are Palestinian films.
Right. Exactly.
I've checked the
Yeah.
list, so it's not
Yeah.
really Jewish.
Yeah,
So
Chazarai. So now let's go into now let's go into Netflix. When we were speaking to their executives, they had said that they were interested, but they wanted what's called creative control. What that means is they have a say in you film it, and then you send it to them, and they edit it and they produce it, and it's their narrative. And once you sign on that dotted line, you sell your soul to them. They could do whatever they want with
but
it.
can you negotiate and say you'll give them creative control, but you have the final say in totem with them?
There's no negotiation with the 800-pound gorilla in the room. They're by far the largest and the biggest, and people, quite frankly, are willing to sell their souls to get on Netflix. I wasn't prepared to do that. I felt that I had to produce something that gave the Jewish people pride and that showed God's truth in this world.
So here you are. You produced the movie, which so far has hundreds of thousands of people just watching it on YouTube and some of them on Instagram too. Tells a story about you're going from young man Ryan, you metamorphose into Berel, you become a drug dealer, you become a nightclub celebrity. So tell us about it. So how did you end up first of all get involved in the world of drugs?
Right. So when I was 13 or 14 years old, there was a boy in our grade, and his older brother was a drug dealer. And the older brother figured that he was gonna, make a quick buck by funneling drugs into our grade and selling them through his younger brother into our grade. And the problem is that all the kids in my grade got all strung out on weed very early on. And the problem with weed is that people don't think it's a problem. At 13 years old, weed is a very big problem.
Tell that to the City Council of New York.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But so weed is a problem, especially at that age. So at a very young age, we had access to it. And the problem with weed is that when you have a problem, you smoke a joint, you smoke weed. When you have an issue, you smoke weed. You get into a fight with somebody, you smoke weed. When you have an emotional issue, you smoke weed. And the problem is that you cannot sober up, because once you sober up, you actually have to deal with your problems.
It's an
And
escape hatchet.
it's an escape. And that's how I got involved. I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't. It's a vicious cycle, especially when you're that young.
So here you are, you're smoking weed, but how'd you go from smoking it becoming you were a customer where you became the seller?
Right.
You became the
So
dealer. You went from
it's a
customer to dealer.
it's a good question. So because
I
it
guess you didn't
was
want to, you were Jewish, you didn't want to buy retail, you don't want to buy wholesale.
exactly because I was embroiled because I was with weed, I was embroiled always with problems. I would get fired from any camp that I was a counselor at. I would get thrown off of any school trip I was on, and people just had labeled me as the bad guy. So I figured, while I'm the bad guy, let me be the baddest guy there is. Meaning, if everybody says that I'm the bad guy, then let me just own this thing. And I said, let me figure out how to make a couple of bucks. So all my friends are smoking weed, so I figured I'm going to start selling the weed. And I grew a big operation. I was for a young kid, I was moving a tremendous amount of weight.
And you're making a lot of money, I assume, doing that too.
I wasn't doing too bad.
So how long a time did you deal with the weed before you moved on? Or what made you
So
decide to leave the business?
what made me leave the business was one of the biggest deals of my life. Um, I was a trunk full of weed, and I was set up by the dealer that sold it to me. So right after he sold it, he had tipped off some goons that I had that much on me, and they followed me. And as I was getting out of my car, and I turn around, they start beating the life out of me with guns, and they stole the weed out of the back of my car, and I actually had to get reconstructive surgery on the front on my mouth,
Wow.
because they left me for dead on the side of the road.
What year are we talking about?
2000. This was when I was nine. How old was I? Let's say 19. 19. How old am I now? Now I'm 33. So what is that? That's 13 years ago.
That's fine. You have to do, I don't want to strain with the math. That's fine. So it's 13 years ago. They beat you up, left you for dead. And so what happened next? You decided no more.
I decided, first of all, I was so scared. I had no idea who did it to me. I was petrified. I didn't leave my house for 6 months.
And you couldn't report it to the police that what they
I
took,
couldn't
right?
report it to what was I supposed to say? I was dealing drugs and got robbed. What was I supposed to say? So what happened next is that I had to figure out a way to repay the drug dealer, because I still owed him the money. They give it to you on consignment. You have to sell and then bring them back the money, but I didn't have the money. So I said to myself, how am I going to make money? And I saw an older guy than me. He was in the nightclub business. And I said, let me give this a crack. Let me give this nightclub business a crack. And I started to work in nightclubs to bring people to promote nightclubs. And I was doing really well at it. And I would take over these nightclubs, and eventually I would turn them from, I would make deals with failing nightclubs, and I would turn them into the hottest place in town.
How'd you do that?
I was really quick to adapt to Facebook and social media. I've always been adept at social media, and I just know how to market. So I would film all my competitors. What they would do is they would take pictures in the nightclub of the party, and then they would post it on Facebook the next morning with their logo, like the party promotion company, their logo on the left-hand corner. What I would do is I would actually have a videographer there, and I would film what was going on, and I would release the next morning a professional video of the night, and people would flock to the nightclub because they wanted to get on the video on the next day.
So you were early embrace of Facebook. So you were doing that, and it was going well. So what happened? Were you happy with your life at that point
So
in time?
right. So things seem to have been going well, but I felt like I wanted a bigger challenge. So I started bringing celebrities to the nightclub. The biggest celebrity I ever worked with, his name is Drake. He's the biggest rapper on planet Earth today, bar none, maybe that ever was. But I was working with Drake when we were both very young. I paid Drake $3,000 to come to Montreal, and I paid for his Greyhound bus. I organized it myself to come
Wow.
from Toronto. Today, Drake cost $1 million to sneeze at your kid's bar mitzvah.
Will he give you a discount? Because
No, I don't think so. He's also Jewish, so there's no discounts. So he,
you haven't made him a Chabadnik yet?
no, I'm trying.
All right.
Hopefully he
Guy, you put filling on him?
hopefully he hears this interview.
All right. So we'll have to get to Drake.
So, but the problem was every time I had to pay these celebrities, it was eating into my profits. So I started to make these. I said, let's make ourselves the celebrities. I want to be paid money to go to people's events. So I hired a camera crew to follow me and my company around, and they were with us everywhere, with the celebrities in the hotels, on the airplanes. I mean, everywhere we were going, the camera crew was there. And I planned a reality show to launch a reality show. And at the night of the launch of my reality show, it was a red carpet event with paparazzi, the whole 9 yards. The whole city showed up. And when I played the video of myself on the big screen, I completely crashed.
From the drugs.
No, from shame.
What were you ashamed about?
I saw who I was portraying on the big screen, and I stood for drugs, sex, and rock and roll, and I was disgusted with who I was.
But why all of a sudden you were living this life? Why all of a sudden did you have a pang of consciousness, say this is who I am? You were watching the videos, you were making them as you were going along. So what transpired at that moment in time where you said, hey, this is a moment of reckoning? What made it happen?
I can't even tell you, Mr. Brenner, till this day. I think that God just saved me. First of all, I think that every person, for sure every Yid, has a conscience, and it has a part of God inside of him. And it just something disgusted me. And it's not like I just was like, oh, I need God in my life. Like that was not the next thought.
But you were disgusted by what you saw on screen.
Yeah. I was like, what am I promoting here? Like, who am I? What do I stand for? Like, what am I encouraging others to do? Like, is this really the life that I want to live? I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what I wanted. I just knew what I didn't want.
Berel Solomon is our guest. He has a video studio. He's a coach. He also has real estate. But he's made a movie on his life called Orthodox, about his growing up non-Orthodox, getting involved in drugs, dealing, nightclubs, and finally became an Orthodox Jew, now a member of the Chabad Lubavitch movement. So, Berel, so you decided that you didn't like what you saw. So how did you get out of the nightclub business? What happened? Were you become more observant? Did you want to get involved with different religions? What happened?
Right.
You had a spiritual moment where you said, I don't like what I saw in the nightclubs.
Right. Good question. So again, Judaism was the last place that I wanted to look, because in my mind, Judaism was false. Nobody that I knew at that time put on tefillin, kept kosher, kept Shabbos, and I wanted truth. And in my mind, Judaism was not true because nobody that I knew was practicing it. And I trusted these people. I trusted my teachers. I trusted my professors. I trusted the people that were older than me, my family, friends. I trusted these people. I figured if, probably they looked into it, and therefore I want truth. So I started to look towards other religions. I went to mosques. I went to churches. I went to interfaith chapels, and every one of them actually had a little glimmer of truth in it. And I said to I started to look towards Buddhism. And I said to my mother at one point, I said, I want to go to a Buddhist ashram because I want spirituality. And my mother looks at me and she says, before you go to the Buddhist ashram, go to synagogue. Today she says, maybe I would have been better in the Buddhist ashram. But that's a different story for a different interview.
That could be another documentary. So but by the way, you're not the first person to say that. She probably felt that you'd be better off as a Buddhist than as a Chabadnik or
Yeah, for sure. At least I would have been, semi-normal.
So she sends you to, but you send you to a conservative synagogue, and what happens? You go.
So there was the chazan, the person who sings the prayers. He was a Breslever, which is a sect of Judaism that's very, very spiritual, very enlightened, very happy. And I said to myself, wow, like, this guy's so happy. Whatever this guy knows, I have to know. And I started to, like, hang out with him and learn from him and absorb from him. And I saw purity, I saw holiness, I saw godliness, I saw happidness. And it just started to rub off on me. And one day he tells me, go to the forest and go talk to God. I thought the guy was a mental case. I thought that, people that speak to God are people that should be, people that should be.
So you were stumped, but you went to the forest anyway.
Okay. Right, good. But right. So I said, okay, I have nothing to lose at this point. And when I went to the forest, I went to go speak to God for the first time. It was almost as if, my wife the other day, she said, I feel bad for you for everything that you went through, because my wife is not observed. My wife was born religious. And I said, you know what? The first time I spoke to God, God was a stranger to me, but I was not a stranger to God. Meaning he was there with me since I was in the womb. He was there with me in all those moments. Maybe I wasn't looking up, but he was definitely looking down. And when I spoke to him, it was like speaking to somebody that knew everything about me, which is such a special experience. And at that moment,
there you are. So you have this revelation. You want to get more involved in Judaism. You're still working for the nightclubs at this time, even though you were repulsed by it, but you still work for them. So you were starting to become more observant at this moment in time?
Yeah. So I started, keeping Shabbat. I would try to put on a kippah every now and then. And
you wear a kippah to the nightclub?
So I tried. I asked the nightclub owner if I could, that I was working for, if I could wear my kippah. And he said, I'm a Christian and you're a Jew. If you don't believe, how am I supposed to believe? And I started wearing my kippah, but he gave me a call a few days later and he's like, look, I see that you're not into it anymore. And I think that it's time that, you go pursue other interests because you're just not into this anymore. And he let me go.
And you didn't mind this. So where'd you go after that? So what'd you do?
I went to go work for my father in our family business. We're in the metal recycling business, and I was doing really well with him, thank God. And but I still had this thirst inside of me, and I wanted to. I needed to quench it, and I decided that I wanted to go to yeshiva. But my parents were very nervous about me going to yeshiva.
Which yeshiva did you want to go to?
It was a Chabad yeshiva called My Unorthodox in Jerusalem. And, to the rest of the world, for you to leave your job to go learn Bible, Torah in Jerusalem for a year while you're making a lot of money does not make sense. Most of the world is predicated on money. You make your decisions based on money. And here, I was making a decision against money, which doesn't make sense.
What did the parents say?
They thought that they were scared. My father, told me that he was calling like cult busters. He thought I was joining a cult.
And would they rather you been on drugs than become religious?
Look, in a certain sense, God bless my parents. They did the best that they could. They also weren't born into a religious home. Like they just didn't know. So in a certain sense, religion was very scary for them because it was the unknown.
But they're part of the movie. They're part of the documentary that you made. They speak openly.
Yeah. Yes.
So here
Yes.
you are. So so you end up going to the yeshiva at the end of the
So
day.
so I got the blessing from my parents. I ended up getting on a plane, and it was the best year of my life. I took advantage of every single second. I crammed 10 years of learning into 1 year in yeshiva, and I really took it seriously. And it was. I always say to everybody that could take away everything that I have, my money, my business, my fame, everything that could take it away. One thing that nobody could take away from me is I have 1 year of Torah learning under my belt.
So here you are. You're going to Israel. You're learning. You come back to the States. You go back to your father's business. What do you do? How do you lead a different lifestyle?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
In other words, my question was: here you are. You come back from Israel. Do you go back to your father's business? Do you do something differently? How do you live a Jewish lifestyle? Because now you've learned. You know more. So you're a different person than when you left.
Right. So when I came back, I remember being very ashamed, not ashamed, but embarrassed because of my beard. And I remember it was very difficult to come back home from Jerusalem because I had,
Were you Ryan when you left and Burrow when you came out? At what point did you go from Ryan to Burrow?
when I started my own business. So when I came home, I was working my family business, and I just felt like I wanted to start my own company. And when I went out on my own, that's when I changed my name to Beryl, which is my Hebrew name, right? So I've just felt like it was my time to reinvent myself.
Did your parents give you the Hebrew name?
Yes.
Okay, so you had Beryl. So here you
Yes.
are, and you're on your own. You're doing business. So were you married before?
Right. So at that point I was not married. And then I start looking for my wife. And I dated the Jewish way, which is with a shidduch, with a matchmaker. And I remember that it was just such a pleasant experience. I mean, I know a lot of people complain about the shidduch process. I have a friend of mine, he's like 34 years old. He became religious like 2 years ago. And he's complaining to me about the shidduch process and this and that. I said to him, let's just call his name Joe. I said, Joe, how many dates have you been on in the past 6 months? He's like, 12 or 13. I said, how many dates were you on 5 years before you're religious? He said, none. I said, so don't complain about the shidduch process. It's better than anything in the world in terms of dating. Just stick with it, and eventually God will bless you with the one you want to marry. So I
Did he end
started
up getting
dating.
engaged?
So he's actually dating a girl very seriously right now. God willing, you should get engaged. So um, so I started dating with the shidduch process, and it was just such a beautiful way to date. There's no physical touch. There's no intimacy. You're just really getting to know the person for the person, and it was so refreshing and it was so beautiful. And one day I get a profile from the one of the matchmakers, and I opened it up and I looked at it and I said, wow, I think I just saw my wife. And she lived in Panama. And I told the matchmaker I was interested. The matchmaker told me she was interested, and the next week I was on a plane to Panama. And then 30 days later we're engaged, and 3 months later we're married. And fast forward 7 years later, thank God I have four beautiful children, and we lived happily ever after, I guess you could say.
Terrific. And at what moment in time did you decide I want to make this movie dealing with my life, going from being unorthodox to orthodox? The movie is called Orthodox, which is available on YouTube. So,
Yeah.
at what point did you say, I want my story to be out? I want to be a movie star?
So I was very involved in there was a movement like probably 12 months ago for agunot, to help agunot get their gets. And I felt that the whole thing started off really, really nice, but then it turned into it's turned into that every rabbi is crooked and every beit din is crooked and every and halacha and Torah is crooked. And I said to myself, this is not what I stand for. And we're talking about a handful of mashuganas in the and it doesn't represent who we are. So I made an Instagram live where I shared my story about how I became religious. And there was this guy in Montreal that was watching it. He's one of the biggest real estate owners in Canada, super wealthy guy. He's a billionaire. And he calls me on the phone and he said, we have to make this into a movie. Do you have any backers? And I said, well, I got to tell you, sir, I think I'm speaking to him right now. And he wrote me a check for close to $100,000. And he said, okay, go, start.
Is that what it took to make the movie, or did it cost more?
Way more than that. I had to raise a lot more than that. I'm probably, forget about my time. By the time everything's said and done, it'll probably be about $250,000.
So, Berel, so Solomon, so you have this movie is out there. You hope to get as many people as possible. Netflix a possibility, or some other channel a possibility?
Look, now that it's out, if they want to show it in its raw form without tainting it the way that I designed it, I would be very happy to sign it up for sure. Why not?
It's very professionally done. I urge
Thank
people
you.
to see Orthodoxed. It's available on YouTube and also Instagram. And if it was made into another movie, which movie actor would like to play Berel Ryan Solomon?
I think for sure Leonardo DiCaprio, no questions asked. He's the most, he looks the most like me for sure.
Right, especially with the little beard, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Your beard is
exactly.
bigger than his ever was.
Exactly. Exactly. Either him or Theodore Herzl, whichever one you want.
Well, that'll take some doing. But
Yeah.
but so is there another movie in the making?
So we do have another one in the making. You're the first person to know about it, and I guess all of your listeners right now. My next movie is called The Jewish Secret to Wealth. And it's focused on a concept, a principle in the Torah that you're allowed to test God with one thing, and that's with giving charity. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe was very big into encouraging people to take very big pledges of sums of money that they're going to give to charity and let God show that it works. And I've done this every year for the past 5 years since I started my business. The first year I did 36,000. Sorry, the first year I did 18,000 pledge, and 36, then 72, then $100,000 a year to charity. And this year I pledged at the beginning of the year $250,000 to charity, and I know that God is going to make it happen. So I want to share the secret, the Jewish secret to wealth, which is giving charity. So that's our next documentary.
Which charity do you give it to? Is it one, or
So
you
I give specifically to organizations that help bring people closer to Judaism.
Berel Solomon, I salute you. Your wonderful movie is called Orthodox, as I said, available on YouTube and on Instagram. It's 9 months in the making. Over hundreds of thousands of people have watched the movie since it came out, and eventually, hopefully, we'll make it to Netflix or some of the other big screen. If not, we'll have to have we have to have one of the big movie actor that's going to play you. But I look forward to having you back again, and thank you for putting it all together.
Thank you, Zev, for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.